Hi everyone, I'm Airier, and today we'll be finishing Overly Sarcastic Productions' Legend Summarized King Arthur. Last time around, we found out that Lancelot is a canonical simp. I'm sorry, I'm still stuck on that. I thought that was a joke, and maybe Grand Order was just making his character stupider. It's like playing it up for humor. No, they were downplaying it. They made him more respectable than the actual legends, including the original ones, where he was basically a Marty Sue who was perfect and lovely and great. Also, apparently the canonical version of Lancelot being ugly was from a later writing period, and it was a single book, but it's the most canonical one. People mention the name. I actually think I have a copy of it somewhere. I do not remember the name of it. It's a little annoying. If anyone knows, let me know in the comments. I'd actually appreciate it. More importantly, you guys know the others. Link below to the original video. Let's just start up and see where this goes, because seriously, Lancelot was actually a simp. That's confirmed. What the hell are we getting into next?
The Vulgate cycle also introduces the concept that Arthur wasn't known to be Uther Pendragon's son and heir, and had to prove it.
Wait. Sorry, I'm used to the current adaptation of Arthur where it was always, oh yeah, he's hiding himself before he pulls the sword. This is where... So the Vulgate cycle not only started Merlin, but also Arthur pulling the sword from the stone. Oh wow, what were the odds?
His credentials by pulling Excalibur out of an
This is where that part of the lore started.
The origin of the sword in the stone concept.
Oh
in this
my
version,
God.
Merlin's story ends kind of tragically,
Oh?
or hilariously, depending on your perspective.
What?
Basically, he falls in love with this lady Nivian, who's incredibly uninterested in him and grossed out by both his persistence, his oldness, and his demon heritage. When Merlin won't leave her alone,
Wait. So it's old, gross, and third is demon. I'm not sure what exactly to say here, but if demon is literally the third reason, how bad were the other ones? Oh my.
Nivian asks him to pretty please teach her everything he knows about magic, and when he does, she uses her newfound powers to seal him away so he'll leave her alone. Points for problem solving. Anyway, along with that stuff,
And that's where Fate Grand Order put in the idea of Merlin being sealed away. Oh my God, they're actually pulling so many things from the various stories. This makes a lot of sense. Sorry, I keep coming back to Fate Grand Order, but it's been more right than it has any right to be, because it's freaking Fate, man. They just butcher so many legends, and this one is surprisingly being treated with more reverence than some of the actual writers contributing to it.
we also get more focus on Arthur's knights when we get to the quest for the Holy Grail, which also introduces Galahad, the
You have no idea how hard it is right now not to drop in a meme for the Monty Python's Holy Grail. It is physically painful not to do that. But I have standards. They're very low, and I mostly pretend they exist, but they technically exist.
legitimate son of Lancelot and Elaine, who, because Lancelot was strictly a one-woman guy, magically transformed herself into Guinevere to get him to sleep with her. Galahad is basically Lancelot.
So, I don't... It's an illegitimate son from a tryst he isn't proud of, because he was so much pining for cheating on his king's wife. I mean, it's so horrible. How dare he ever not do something that could get him exiled and or killed, or have other people exiled and or killed. I'm saying this knowing what happens later in the story is not what's happening at the period they're still going up for. Wow.
But better, like not sleeping with another man's wife better. Galahad kicks off his being
Ooh,
better than
comfy.
Lancelotness by sitting in a chair that will only allow the Grail Knight to sit in it, or else it'll kill him. Galahad, not dying, is recognized as the Grail Knight, and thus the one who
Oh God, they have freaking Arthur. I don't recognize them because they're identical. Mordred and Guinevere too.
will find the Holy Grail.
Oh,
He
one
also
of them pulled the sword from the stone. One of those is probably Lancelot.
pulls a magic sword out of a stone just because he wasn't symbolically significant enough already. The knights do some
Did they really do the song in the background? Oh my God, was that initial D? Yes, yes it is. Geez, Lancelot, sure you don't have a kid, don't you? How about yes? That's not possible, and is therefore funny. Okay, that was Lancelot then. Wow. And then Guinevere's just pissed.
jousting and some partying, and a few people mention that this Galahad kid seems a lot like Lancelot, only
But better.
somehow. And that evening, they all have a vision of the Holy Grail
What?
covered by a cloth, which also magically makes a bunch of food appear out of nowhere. Gawain declares that he wants to actually see the Grail, and this prompts 150 of Arthur's knights to decide to go on a quest.
Thanks, Gawain. Thanks a bunch. Wow, he just took 150 knights. I have no idea what army sizes were like during this time period, but I'm assuming 150 is not insubstantial. Granted, I think thousands was probably a lot as well.
Quest for the Grail, which Aurthur thinks is a bad idea and blames Gawain for. So Lancelot, Galahad, Gawain, Percival, and Bors, along...
Wow, that's a lot of things. Galahad, Lancelot, Percival, Bors. Hey, this whole idea was... And he's literally the background character in his own quest.
With 145 other knights who are significantly more disposable, all independently head off to quest for the Grail. And by the way, this Percival is the same Percival as was in the older Grail story too, basically being slotted into the story as the previous Grail Knight candidate, so Galahad can also be shown to be cooler than him. But on top of showing off how cool Galahad is, the whole story is basically about driving home how not cool Lancelot is, because pretty much every turn in his quest is some other god-given sign that he's not worthy of seeing the Grail. This culminates in him actually reaching the Grail chamber, at which point it shoots a fireball at him and knocks him out for 3.5 weeks.
Okay, so 1, Lancelot nearly succeeded. 2, he got Indiana Jonesed. You know, that's a phrase I never thought I would use in an actual applicable setting. First time for everything.
Galahad, meanwhile, having spent his quest time fighting villains, rescuing maidens, repairing swords with a single touch, and healing the Fisher King, because oh yeah, that's still a thing, finally reaches the Grail with Percival and...
Oh, they're just going back to the Fisher King again.
Repairing swords with a single
like it's
touch
hard?
and healing the Fisher King.
I can't properly express how much this means without compromising our PG aesthetic. Well, I guess that does count as fixing a sword with a touch, but, you know, this is YouTube. I know better than to say any joke I'm talking about right there. Now, if this was PG-13 YouTube, you know the one, there are a lot of other videos showing a guy fixing a sword with a touch. You know, there's certain things coming out of my mouth every now and again that I regret after saying them, but I'm sure this will never come back to haunt me in any way, shape, or form.
King, because oh yeah, that's still a thing, finally reaches the Grail with Percival and Bors in tow.
Oh, they
at
all
which
got
point,
to
after
it.
some shenanigans, Galahad gets carried up to heaven by a choir of angels, and the Grail is never seen again. Lancelot, having learned a valuable lesson about his sinful ways, resolves to stop with the adultering, a resolution which lasts...
Really? That old-time blues? It's the ending song to Cowboy Bebop. I don't mind the song. It's a great song. But literally, you're equating Lancelot to Spike here. That is... Unironically, now I want Lancelot in space as a bounty hunter who just realized he can't get his goal. That sounds like an amazing anime. I mean, yes, it would literally just be Cowboy Bebop again. But it would be an actual good version of Cowboy Bebop because nothing else was ever remade after the initial anime. Nothing else. Please don't break that sense of delusion I have carefully cultivated that I definitely believe in. There's nothing else I can think of right now.
Till about the next time he sees Guinevere.
Yeah.
Basically what we're seeing here is the collision between the concept of courtly love as a good thing and the concept of being faithful to your husband as a good thing. We're ending up with kind of a weird moral conflict as a result of these two conflicting visions of what love and marriage should really mean. Anyway, alongside all that Lancelot drama, we also get some major developments in the character of Morgan Le Fay. Now, we haven't talked about her yet because she hasn't really been important up till now, although her character...
But she technically was in it because it wasn't... Yeah, she was the one who brought Aurthur to Avalon in the earliest ones we've talked about so far that had more than just a couple lines written on it.
Does feature as early as Geoffrey's Historia, where she's characterized as the eldest of 9 obviously Fey sisters who live in Avalon. She's fully benevolent in that
9 fully Fey and benevolent. Damn.
version, and is in fact the one who heals Aurthur while he's resting in Avalon. Cutscene introduced the idea of Morgan being Arthur's sister, as well as her future rivalry and dislike of Guinevere, and the Vulgate cycle expands on this by giving her a whole backstory. In this version, Morgan is the older half-sister to King Arthur, and she's betrothed by her stepfather Aurthur to an allied king she doesn't really like. Morgan, in classic teen rebel...
Wait, what? Hey, not my kid. You like political marriages? Marriages? I can't speak today. Trick question. I don't care. Get lost. Yeah. And wasn't Aurthur... Doesn't matter. He was kind of killed off. No. It was Vortigern, the uncle, who was... But that comes later, apparently.
And she's betrothed by her stepfather Aurthur to an allied king she doesn't really like. Morgan, in classic teen rebel form, expresses her displeasure by sleeping around a whole bunch, but is caught by Guinevere, which kicks off...
I'm sorry. Guinevere was the one... Morgan What is the meaning of this passionate pants-on hugging? Sorry, we can't all be chaste as you. There is irony on top of irony here for so many ways, and I'm pretty sure I can't go into any detail on YouTube. But if I would, it would be very much along the lines of 1, 2, 3. Yeah, that's basically where it goes.
Off her famous rivalry with both Guinevere and Aurthur. Morgan is, among other things, very well studied, learning astronomy, astrology, magic, healing, etc. She studied under Merlin for a while, but mostly spends her time coming up with highly complex magical schemes to try and bring...
Step 1. There, fire a fairy knight to crash the new year. Set his death prophet. Oh my god. What the hell?
One of her more famous attempts documented...
You don't think this is a little overcomplicated? Do not question me. Okay. That's the Green Knight, okay.
In Gawain and the Green Knight involves her conscripting an indestructible knight to go to Arthur's court and get his head chopped off in the hopes that the...
So, Gawain, same time next year? Yeah, because he didn't die from his head being cut off.
The shock of this sight will cause Guinevere to drop dead on the spot. It's all very Wile E. Coyote. We touched on this when we talked about the Grail.
This isn't cool now. Aw, nuts. Yeah, Guinevere and Lancelot.
But throughout the Vulgate cycle, Guinevere and Lancelot are of course continuing their courtly love tryst, but probably due to the Christianization of this version of the story, this is treated less like noble courtly love and more like garden variety adultery. This version is also the first telling where more...
I sure do like betraying the trust of my king. Gasp. I should try that. My god, that's... Mordred.
Mordred discovers their affair, but though he tries to persuade the other knights to kick up a fuss about it, nobody does.
Wait. He actually did? Guys, Lancelot is totally baiting Guinevere. This could throw Camelot into chaos. Meh. Yeah, it actually hasn't so far. Mordred was the one in this version to raise a fuss about it. Huh.
Does. In fact, Aurthur learns about the whole cheating thing from Morgan Le Fay, but it's not actually one of her schemes or anything. See, after a long and varied career of trying to destroy Aurthur and all he holds dear, Morgan just kinda stops one day. And Aurthur just kind of assumes she's dead until he stumbles on her castle several years later to discover that she's not only alive, but totally reformed, and isn't...
Huh? What, she just found out that he's destroying himself from the inside? It's like, oh, well, I need a new passion in life because he's outdoing me on this one. At destroying himself.
In fact, planning on moving to Avalon to live with all the other sorceresses. While he's there, Morgan decides...
Yeah, it's great. Camelot's really coming along. Guinevere's doing well. She seems really happy. I'm so glad. Oh god, the face there. I didn't even... The ultimate scheme to take down King Arthur. Being a good person and telling him the truth in a way he probably believes. Damn.
That she can't keep Lancelot's tryst a secret from him, and shows him the giant painting Lancelot made one of the times he was in prison there, documenting the whole affair for some reason.
You know what? I've done dumber things when bored. This actually makes perfect sense to me.
I don't know. Lancelot is stupid. Anyway, Arthur is very upset, returns to Camelot, kicks off a huge conflict with Lancelot, who runs away to Gaul, and while Arthur's away fighting Lancelot, Mordred casually usurps.
Fight me, Lancelot! And then we're back to the... And Guinevere, are you familiar with the phrase, incest is wincest? Technically, it's not incest in this version because you're not the brother anymore. You're the nephew. Or is this still the brother version? Because I don't think this is the version that was the son of Morgan Le Fay either. It's actually getting hard to keep those straight.
Throne. In this version, Mordred fails to marry Guinevere because she hides from him in the Tower of London. But beyond that, the rest plays out about...
Wait. The Tower of London plays into this? So this is just in London. Was this pre-Camelot? You know what? Now that I think about it, I don't think they've actually mentioned that. Was Camelot a later addition to King Arthur's mythos than everything else? I probably just misremembering. I'm misremembering this. I'm just being weird. I'm just being me. I'm making a mistake. That would be way too weird if that wasn't the case.
As expected. Arthur returns, strife of Camlin, Mordred dies, etc., etc., etc. In this version, Morgan completes her redemption arc by being the first of the sorceresses to arrive to ferry Arthur off to Avalon. In the aftermath of that whole debacle, Guinevere becomes a nun, Lancelot becomes a monk, and thanks to a promise he made at one point, he can't even be buried alongside his love when he dies, because the moral of the Vulgate is that adultery is bad, kids. No.
Although they literally survived in religious institutions repenting for what they did, so according to the time period, that wouldn't actually be a bad ending. Also, don't look up what nunneries were like during this time period. It really does change exactly what kind of ending this sounds like.
Now, one meta thing we gotta talk about is that although Arthurian folklore has a lot of Christian elements, what with the Holy Grail and all, it's also got a lot of traditional Celtic folklore wrapped up in it, or pagan, if that's
Celtic,
how you want to
really.
phrase it. I mean, Morgan Le Fay literally means
Fay.
Morgan the Fairy. The Lady of the Lake is blatantly supernatural without being divine, and in the 14th century poem Gawain and the Green Knight is a suspiciously Fay-like entity, what with the immortality, the illusions, the green aesthetic, etc. And he
Cutting off
might
the head.
actually be a variant of the mysterious folkloric Green Man. And despite the fact that the Christianization of the story is almost as old as the idea of transcribing the story, Celtic folklore elements kept getting added in for centuries. They're not all holdovers from the original telling, whatever that was.
Ironically, this means that, yeah, I know I'm going to sound repetitive on this, but Fate Grand Order did a very good retelling of the Arthurian legend then, without adding as much to it. They added a lot of things later, but not to the actual legend itself. Huh. Yeah, I'm still stuck on that. I'm probably going to be stuck on that for a while.
The idea
It's
that
weird.
Excalibur was a gift from the mysterious fairy tale Lady of the Lake is as late as the 1400s, not an original pre-Christian idea. The stories were getting more pagan elements at the same time that they were getting more Christian elements, and there's a lot of debate over how exactly this fusion of antithetical worldviews happened, but if I had to guess, I'd say it's probably a fairly classical case of belief systems intersecting without colliding. Now, I've noticed this a lot, especially in the more historically Celtic parts of Europe, that a lot of fairy stories and ideas have survived to the modern day, not as fun mythical folklore, but just as stuff people know is true. Ireland still doesn't pave over fairy circles, and from
What? I thought fairy circles were just something you put up. An Irish MP has blamed damage to road on ferries, saying that disturbance to their forts caused a dip in the tarmac. In Irish folklore, tampering with ferry forts can cause one to become cursed. He said there is something in those areas you shouldn't touch. Okay. Wow, I was not expecting that from 2017.
circles. And from this angle, the coexistence of Christianity with a fundamentally pagan belief system of fairy tale supernatural interference is actually pretty precedented.
Oh, I get what she's talking about, though. But because those are beliefs that you don't actually think are religious, they're just, oh yeah, here's just happenstance knowledge that is just taken for granted because it's just common knowledge for the area you're at. It doesn't feel like it's inherently religious because it's just like knowing the sun rises and sets in the east. There's probably someone out there furiously typing, but it sets in the west and rises in the east. Yeah, I know. It's the idea that you just think one thing long enough that it becomes wrong, even if it's right. Sorry, I'm a dick today. I know. I'm probably going to get a comment about that. Just someone's like, God damn you, Airier. I mean, they do that comment regardless, but you know what I mean.
Again, though, just a theory, and we don't know for certain what the logic behind the folklore was because it's been, centuries.
They added in thinking it was normal because it's what was normal to them.
After Mallory wrote La Morte d'Arthur, which was basically just a remix of the Vulgate cycle, there was kind of a lull in interest in Arthurian mythos for a few hundred years. People stopped writing proper Arthurian.
Guys, isn't what I represent more important than whether or not I really existed? No! Granted, I've actually had that exact conversation on the internet and in person, and yeah, there's even places where they think it might be the castle that Camelot was based on, so yeah.
In poetry, and there was also growing concern about the historicity of King Arthur and whether any of the stories about him could be considered even a little bit true, or if he even existed. These questions were uncomfortable because Arthur was kind of the foundation of the whole matter of Britain, and the idea that he maybe didn't exist was uncomfortable.
Wait. So a lot of British ideology and just the concept of the nation was based around the idea of King Arthur? I thought it was just a story that grew up alongside rather than being a foundational myth. Granted, I'm also American. What the hell do I know?
In a lot of ways.
A legend is sung
Nostalgia?
of when England was
Oh,
young.
yeah.
So no new Arthurian stuff really happened until the early 1800s when La Morte d'Arthur was reprinted for the first time in over a century. Now with the benefit of nostalgia, Arthur...
Oh, wow. They even have everyone in the villain/hero poses. All the way from the light to the purple and glowing eyes, and Arthur right in the middle.
Arthurian folklore got popular again in a big way as a romanticized ideal of chivalry and stuff. Unfortunately, World War I...
Pre-World War I, notions of chivalry and honor Glorious Warfare unsurprisingly didn't survive the many horrific wartime innovations, consequences of World War One, i.e. the war nobody liked. Fusel's The Fate of Chivalry essay examines the consequences this had on the faith in chivalry. Yes, it's like believing in certain aspects of this is how you should behave, when the other guy is literally throwing gas canisters that kill everyone in horrific ways that leave anyone left maiming and wishing they were dead, would possibly make, honorable war seem kind of like a horrific idea because it's not honorable. Yeah, I can't see how that could ever have that effect.
One apparently kind of bruised the popularity of the chivalry idea, but the story stayed popular and has continued to be popular into the modern day. Now, the canon of modern Arthurian folklore isn't really the same as the Vulgate or Morte d'Arthur canon. There's been drift over the past few centuries, and I think this is because the way we think about King Arthur has changed. Geoffrey of Monmouth was writing a fictionalized history that was still supposed to be grounded in real historical events. Chrétien used Geoffrey's Arthurian canon to glorify his character Lancelot, and with him the French ideals of courtly love. The following centuries brought heavy Christianization and an exploration of Christian themes, as
So it's literally a translation of a translation of a translation, in the sense that it's not being translated between languages, but from belief systems and intention. It's literally the game of telephone over the course of centuries, where there's actually no desire to represent the initial facts or to try and get the correct ideas over, but to do your own thing and see what you can add to it, because fuck it, this is what I want to do. It's like playing telephone to intentionally fuck with people, but not being able to tell them at what point they are being fucked with. Which, admittedly, is the best way to play that game.
Ascribing Merlin's magic to demonic power, making Morgan Le Fay a scholar instead of a spirit, and using Lancelot's fundamentally contradictory characterization of supposed noble paragon and chronic adulterer to explore the notions of sin and impurity in the quest for the Holy Grail and the ultimate downfall of Camelot. In the centuries of lapsed interest in Arthurian canon, Arthur was rarely discussed, and only ever used for political commentary on modern events. For the past 1,000 years, Arthurian canon has been used to glorify specific movements.
It didn't really just occur to me the time frames we're looking at here, but this is old. Like 1,000 years is nothing to shake at for a story that is functionally still relevant today. Hell, I keep going on about Fate Grand Order, and that is, for gacha games, old, but that's a drop in the bucket compared to all of the lore prior and how many people have alternate retellings. Hell, there's probably a bunch that only were various local retellings that were only oral because that's what they had, and no one ever found out about them again unless they're written down somewhere. We just haven't found out yet. It might even be the weirdest one yet. I don't know.
And agendas, but recently we've stopped adding to Arthurian canon and have started reimagining it. Arthurian canon has basically gotten the urban fantasy treatment. Rather than focusing on the story itself, we treat it like source material. Everyone knows King Arthur, but what if King Arthur
Called it!
was a lady? Everyone knows Merlin, but what if Merlin was a skinny British kid? Everyone knows Mordred, but what if Mordred was a sympathetic pawn of his evil mother? Maybe to spice up your modern urban fantasy story, you should have the Fisher King show up, or make the bad guy Morgan Le Fay, or
I actually recognize some of these, but others I really don't.
throw the Grail in there for funsies. Basically, rather than treating the
Wait, what? I'm pretty sure that actually was Indiana Jones.
Fisher King show up, or make the bad guy Morgan Le Fay, or throw the Grail in.
Yeah, it's the freaking plain cup that's all musted over, and you can tell there's something underneath it, but they have it all dirtied because it's literally Raiders of the Lost Ark. No, wait, Ark was the Ark. This is not Raiders, of course. No, it's the third one that... The Crusade? I can't remember the third Indiana Jones name. Wow. I'm actually pulling a blank on this one. That's a good thing they stopped at 3.
In there for funsies. Basically, rather than treating the Arthurian mythos like historical fact or moral creed, we're treating it like a mythology. And just like modern urban fantasy will casually mix up the events of major Norse myths for the sake of an incredibly entertaining movie, or rewrite Greek myths to be more character-driven, or just straight up make up new gods, King Arthur's entire...
I'm sorry, what? I mean, it's Tumblr, so I'm not going to say
Greek
much,
myths
but...
to be more character-driven, or just straight up...
Another tip, name Vesperian. Not only will you shock everyone, including her, since Aphrodite was a jealous hoe who burnt half her face off, but you'll win Hades' favor as his most beloved daughter. Anything that praises her will make humankind... What? Not a real goddess, Tumblr. Was someone just bullshitting? Or did they think this is real because they just made mistakes? It could be either one. I actually don't know.
make up new gods. King Arthur's entire
They
story
had
is
a video
basically
on
an
it.
open source grab bag of modern fantasy ideas. And on top of that, modern writing also puts a lot more focus on character-driven storytelling than story-driven storytelling. Up until now, Arthurian canon has been written and expanded on for specific reasons. People added adventures to provide precedent for social movements or add in characters they liked. But a lot of modern writing puts almost all of the focus on dealing with characterization, with the story mostly providing context for that characterization, rather.
This is something that I completely get. It makes sense to me, but this is actually kind of shocking that I'm just remembering. Not everyone thinks like I do. This, to give some context, character-driven is you hear the character's thoughts, you hear their character's ideas, you understand why they're doing things, how they're interacting, as opposed to story-driven ones where you're basically a stand-in who has a name and you're seeing what happens. It's the difference between a fantasy setting where, actually, a one-on-one, this is the difference between Star Wars, where you're invested in the characters, versus a book series like Foundation, where the characters could have any name and be anyone. They're there to fill a role, and then you're just seeing the story progress through them. Like, okay, this character will be alive through these pages, this character will be alive through these ones. This reference might not work if you don't know the novels of Foundation War. Storytelling, Isaac Asimov in the previous century, that was very much, here are ideas that I'm going to put a fantasy setting with to show these ideas. The characters exist to show how these work. They're literally just so you have a reference point for an idea, as opposed to you have an idea showing you the character. It's basically what you're focusing on is how things are working with the character-driven, and you're seeing how it's working with them moving through it, as opposed to story-driven, where it's, here is what's happening, and this person's moving through it. That's a terrible way to explain it. Details. There's actually entire classes that go into this entire type of dichotomy.
Rather than writing stories with the characters being incidental or vehicles for the plot. And because of this focus in characterization, everyone taking that angle focuses very specifically on two parts of Arthurian mythos. Lancelot, Guinevere, and Arthur's whole situation, and Mordred. Now, the Lancelot, Guinevere, Arthur thing has two major angles. Either Lancelot is the good guy, or Arthur is. If Lancelot's the
Really? They're just dropping that in? Of course they're just dropping that in there. Oh my god. If Lancelot is good, Arthur plus Guinevere marriage, unhappy. Arthur equals bad husband. Married to the job, neglectful, abuse, optional. Arthur, bad king. Aww.
good guy, then Arthur's characterization gets pulled into being a bad husband. Either he's neglectful because he has to go fight all these wars.
I'm sorry, the music in there's just, oh my god, it's such a meme. I've never even heard this song ever on its own originally. I've heard it in memes, only memes. Nowhere else. I don't even know what song it is, but everywhere, man.
Wars, or he's a full-on jerk, or he's boring.
Yeah.
And Lancelot is, by contrast, a noble, heroic paragon here to rescue Guinevere from her lousy husband with the power of love. If
Arthur equals good, Lancelot equals asshole, self-absorbed, self-important, impulsive, unaware of consequences, disloyal, traitorous. To be fair, and he really doesn't deserve it, all of these are technically shown throughout a lot of his mythos, even with the crazy ones. He was self-absorbed, he was self-important, he was impulsive, unaware of the consequences, and disloyal, traitorous. Just, we were shown him in a way that those were side effects, not part of his character. The impulsive just being, I should go have sex with my king's wife. Yeah, I know, it's courtly love, the entire book period, different things. But, personal opinion, I like it when they're not mutually exclusive. Both could be good and just still have issues. I personally prefer those stories because they feel less like you're trying to shoehorn in a villain and more like actual drama.
Arthur's the good guy, then Lancelot will be an egotistical, self-centered jerk who betrays his trust without thinking. And Arthur will be a beleaguered, betrayed man whose kingly duty demands that he execute his wife and hunt down his best knight. Either way, plenty of good characterization stuff to exploit. Arthur's characterization is further jerked around by the character of Mordred. So in the first texts that specify Mordred's relationship to Arthur, he's written to be his nephew, the son of Arthur's half-sister Morgause. Later versions changed it up so that Mordred was also Arthur's illegitimate son, but
so there have been a lot of different ones here. Oh, and this one, Morgan was a cousin, not the sister or a half. Oh, no, the same mother. That's what that means. I haven't looked at a
The
family tree in a long
modern
time.
version of Mordred is the son of Morgan Le Fay, conceived by Aurthur and used by Morgan as one of her many schemes to bring Aurthur down. You may note this has zero precedent in the mythos. Morgan and Morgause are different characters, and Morgan and Mordred canonically have nothing to do with each other. Not only that, but Mordred's decision to usurp Arthur's throne is always his own ambition. Also, lest we forget, Morgan Le Fay has already given up on being evil for years by the time Mordred does his traitor thing and Arthur falls. But the modern tellings combine the disparate elements of Mordred's betrayal and Morgan's routine scheming into one significantly nastier, game-changing plot, where...
Huh. The modern take, Morgan schemes, Mordred's betrayal, creative license equals claiming your birthright 101. Yeah. Huh. Sorry, I love how there's all these different aspects. It's so freaking cool. I know it's weird because like, oh yeah, the villain. Now they're not a villain anymore. They kind of got their redemption arc. But just all the various ways to interpret the character. I don't know enough about the current stuff coming out in FGO with the Fae, but apparently there's a lot of shit going down. I don't know how this would play into it if they're trying to change characterization based on this. I'm only saying that because apparently I've been told shit happens, and I've been comparing FGO so much, it might actually be relevant. If someone knows, it's Fake Grinder. I'm assuming no one has enough time in the comments to write as much of a novel as would explain that, so thanks in advance if you try and fail, but thank you anyways.
And Morgan bears Arthur's illegitimate son and specifically raises him to overthrow his father and claim his throne, which is a lot more evil than hiring a local fairy to prank Guinevere and hoping she dies from it. But as a side effect, this also changes Arthur and Mordred's entire dynamic. Classically, Mordred is the traitor and Arthur is the good king brought down. But in this version, Arthur's not so good, what with the whole illegitimate child thing, and Mordred isn't the traitor, he's the pawn in his mother's schemes.
Oh, yeah. So before traitor, after bastard heir, pawn of his mother, manipulated, sympathetic, good king, unfaithful husband, victim of karma. Before, morally complex, regular annoyance, turned protagonist, shonen. After, worst mother ever, evil enough to have a kid just for revenge. There's a joke in there, but I don't think that's Alabama enough.
Or, from another angle, Arthur's tragic karmic downfall brought on by his own wrongdoing. Mordred becomes sympathetic, and Arthur becomes morally complex, at the cost of Morgan becoming a whole lot morally simpler. So the moral of this complex, century-spanning story is, if Arthur, Guinevere, and Lancelot had all just been honest about their feelings and entered into a mutually supportive romantic relationship, we could have called it a polyamory. Thank you and good night.
Polyamory. Oh my, you just had to freaking, for anyone who doesn't get it, polyamory is multiple people in a relationship. Polyamory means there's multiple people with weapons. I see where they're going with this. God damn, does it actually work? So I need to ask right off the bat. People have told me a lot of the bigger videos that Overly Sarcastic Productions have done, where both Blue and Red get in and go tear things in some of their diatribes, are really in-depth looks at some things on a more analytical basis. Have they done that for the King Arthur legend? Because I would love to see how they're breaking it down even more than this video would touch on, because it feels like this is just an overview of the legend. Not just the legend itself, but how the legend has changed from time periods and centuries. And it's over 1,000 years old, man. There have been a lot of changes, and somehow not as many as you would think, unless there's more that you just glossed over. And it does kind of feel like that because 1,000 years of history, man. I want to know if there's more they did with this somewhere else, because I would love to see a more in-depth reading by them to see just what changed, how it changed. Oh God, I'm literally asking to see if they did literary analysis. I'm an English major. I was told to do that a lot when in school for said English major. Hated it. Did it. Was good at it. Hated it. And I'm asking for it now, unironically. This is like hating tea. And, you know, we're going to just set aside if someone hates it. That's literally a medical condition and horribly, horribly terrible. And they should be pitied. But then that person's suddenly asking for tea while still hating tea. And you're sitting there going, huh, that looks like a stroke. Should I be worried? Probably. Well, all things aside, though, this is really great. And I love this. I loved seeing what kept true, what didn't, how the characters changed, became more complex or less complex, how the initial ones were admittedly more sympathetic or less sympathetic. I like this kind of complex story, how it's changed, been reinterpreted and reimagined and treated as a cohesive whole, but it's entirely not. And so many of the aspects that we think are just, oh yeah, this is the story, are either new additions or completely bullshit because people reimagining it added things in, but those reimaginings are now confused with the originals, which were also just conflated in their own right. It's just, sorry, this is a level of complexity that I love, and the easiest thing I can think of that sounds like this is the Undertale community and what the hell they've done to that, as shown by Super Eye Patch Wolf and when he decided to tear that apart. It's literally the same video Overly Sarcastic Productions did, but on something older with the exact same process of just character shift and reimaginings by a community growing well beyond the original source. I was not expecting to make that correlation of coincidence, but it fits. Undertale is the King Aurthur of the 21st century. Or the 22nd? Which one are we in? I don't know. Probably 21st, yeah. Huh. I stand by that even if it's weird as hell. Basically what I'm saying is, if you haven't already, there's a link below to the original video. Hit it up. And if you know what I should check out from Overly Sarcastic Productions next, let me know, because there's a lot of good stuff. I'm probably going to continue the Legends playlist because there's a few more in there that aren't rubbing it in my face that I'm waiting for the next Journey to the West episode to come out, and it's still not. And it's going to be a number of months before the next one. I'm not jonesing for the next one. I'm completely and utterly addicted, and I wish it was out already. Yeah. But yeah, I'll see you guys in the next one. Adios.